Okay.
Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. My name is Ann Harrison, and I have the special pleasure of speaking with Trish Wilkinson, who is the author of Brain Stages: How to Raise Smart, Confident Kids and Have Fun Doing It. Like I said, we're authentic here on Inspirational Journeys. Welcome to the show, Trish.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. I'm so excited to talk to other authors because, I was writing for a long time before, and at one point I thought, well, I'm just never going to get published. I guess my mission is never going to happen. In fact, this is a great story. So, we raised a couple of kids who had challenges, and it was kind of tricky, and they didn't have all the information that they have now and all the help that they have now. At the time, and our kids had attention issues and auditory processing and just various issues. And so basically, I did all the studying I could. So when our older daughter was 7, I melted down. My husband, I don't remember where he was at the time, but he traveled a lot for work. But I think he was home at that time. He just wasn't at home.
Uh-huh.
And our daughter had just lost her homework after I had just told her to put it into her backpack, and I had helped her with it. And she just, in the nastiest possible way, accused me of losing her homework.
No.
And well, she was only 7 and she was freaked out that she couldn't find her homework. But I did not react well at all. In fact, I pretty much caused an adverse childhood experience. I pretty much caused an ace for her. And I thought, I'm supposed to know kids. I had already been a teacher for several years. I had taught several grades by then. I was great with other people's kids. But, she would tap into my own triggers, and I just lost it with her that day. So oh my gosh, I read all kinds of books and articles. I talked to professionals. I pored over studies. I paid attention to all the latest stuff that was coming out about brain research, because I knew that our kids had attention issues, but I didn't want to put them on psychotropic drugs. And it was a good thing I did, because I actually had a brain map done of our older daughter, and it turned out that she had areas in her brain spinning too fast, not too slow. So putting her on Adderall or Ritalin, or one of the other drugs that speed up your brain counterintuitively to help kids pay attention better, in her particular circumstance, would have been a disaster.
Mm.
So it was a good thing that we did that. But long story short, I know, too late, but long story short is my husband and my daughter actually said, you know what, Mom, you need to help other parents. I mean, wouldn't you have liked to have known what was coming and what to do and whatever? So I wrote this grade by grade guide through elementary school. But right before we moved to Bend from California, we actually raised our kids in San Diego, California. And right before we moved, I had all these agents and all these independent publishers at conferences say, Trish, this is a great idea, a grade by grade guide through elementary school. But a book like this by teachers, they don't sell. So, and I thought, who wouldn't want this? Who wouldn't want to know kind of where their child's brain development is at this age, and what's going on with them basically? So, I mean, all kids are different, but what's going on with them? And here are a whole bunch of games to play to make sure that they get their needs met academically and they get their social and emotional learning. And we're finding out now, in fact, I'm doing a big presentation for UC Irvine soon. We're finding out now that social and emotional learning is every bit as important as academic learning. And so I thought, who wouldn't want this? But I eventually threw the notes away right before we moved to Bend.
Oh, no.
And I had like recordings of interviews. I mean, you can't even believe all the stuff I had in these boxes that I just tossed because they had been sitting in my garage untouched for a year. Everybody kept telling me, and I was trying for a couple of years to get somebody to agent this book or an independent publisher to publish it. And then 1 month after we moved to Bend, I also coach other authors, and I have several bestsellers now, best-selling authors. So one of my authors had a publisher in Colorado, this independent publisher. She calls me out of the blue a month after I moved to Oregon and says, I talked to one of my other authors, and he said you have a background in education, and I have this PhD who's written a whole bunch of notes, and she wrote a book on how kids' brains function and develop and learn. And she really wants to publish this, but it reads like, and she wants to publish it to the mainstream, but it really reads like a textbook. And she said, and I don't feel like anybody is really going to want to read this book. And she said, so can you look at it and edit it and maybe coach her, whatever. And so she had me look at it, and I said, I love what she's doing, but I would have to literally rewrite this book. And I'm not a ghostwriter. So anyway, long story short, she said, well, do you want to work with her? And so so we're all ready to write this Brain Stages book together, and she passes away. So
well, that just goes to show you God gave you the book.
Yeah, isn't that true? He was just like, oh, you think you're getting out of this, Trish?
No.
So really that's what happened. So I had been writing young adult fiction. In fact, I probably could get that published. It's really timely, but I've gotten so into the Brain Stages thing now because now I coach other parents. I've gotten certified. I've done EFT, which is like tapping, and Psych K, which is reprogramming. You're helping people to reprogram their subconscious minds to recreate their limiting beliefs into beliefs that serve them, and all these other things. In the meantime, and I'm writing a jump rope book with one of the top jump ropers in the world. He has a Guinness record, and his name is David Fisher. He's the rope warrior. And Darren Sardelli, who's a children's poet. So we have a collection of about 70 rhymes, jump rope rhymes that teach things because of the connection between rhythm and learning in the brain. So, and hopefully that'll be coming out by the end of the year, but we'll see, because we've run into some snags along the way, as these things do.
Yeah.
But it's been a blast to put together all of these rhymes and have these other two very talented writers that I'm working with. So that's really fun, the collaboration, and they're alive. I mean, I was so looking forward to collaborating with Jackie, and that just didn't happen. But her name is still on the book because she's the one who originally came up with the idea to include all the brain research. And that's how it ended up called Brain Stages. So she's still on the book, even though she, I ended up writing pretty much the book.
Wow.
But it's just exploded into all other kinds of things. And that's why I wanted to mention to your other writers, whoever's listening, don't be like me and give up.
Exactly.
If it's meant to be, if you have a true heart to help people, whether you write fiction or nonfiction, if you're really thinking of serving your reader and what you can do for your reader, either in that story that you're creating, for them to be watching a character grow in some way and some lesson they can get out of it besides just entertainment, as well as if you're writing nonfiction and you have specific purposes for your writer. If you're really focused on what your reader can get from whatever you're writing, then it's just going to keep coming back.
This is true.
It's not going anywhere.
This is true. So what inspired you to become a writer?
Writing for me, free writing for me is just kind of a form of meditation. It's come from apple trees, which was one of my issues in dealing with my kids. And a lot of creative people have attention issues. It's just the way it is. And we are not deficient, nor are we disordered. Our brains just work differently. So we have to come up with ways to compensate to live in this society of ours. But in the same way, having a brain that works like ours works to our advantage where creativity is concerned.
True.
So free writing has always been kind of my form of meditation. And I started off writing stories, and I had been teaching for 23 years, and I taught all the grades, and I found that writing was a great way, because I was excited about writing. The kids in my class ended up excited about writing, even ones that hated writing when they got it by the end of the year, because it was a way for them to express themselves in a whole different way, and to process emotions, thoughts and emotions and information and all that kind of stuff. So for me, writing was just kind of an integral part of who I was. And then I started writing. I was working with a lot of children in East LA who had been immigrants, and sometimes they wouldn't find out that they were living in the country illegally until they were in like middle and high school. So I wrote a story originally, the beginning of a series, about a girl named Maya Cipriano, who discovers that she's been living in the country illegally, but she doesn't discover that until she's in Mexico, and she's in grave danger, and she has to get out of Mexico because she went to save her father. And she went to get out of Mexico, and now she's not sure she can get back into the United States because she discovers that she's been living there illegally. So it's because I was working with all these kids who, what do you do? Your parents brought you here when you're really young. You're not legally here, and now when you're grown, you got to figure out how to live in this society. And it's anyway. So it kind of just explores that whole thing that's happening in our country.
Right.
So that was all these kids and just loving them and loving their families. And and I know there are other ramifications. There are a lot of political views on this, and I don't get into politics. I am nonpartisan. But I just really felt that situation for these kids who I was working with. And then, writing Brain Stage is this nonfiction project of helping parents raise healthier, well-adjusted, well-educated kids, because it's amazing the small tweaks that we can make in our routines that just make a huge difference. Routines in brain health, like for diet and hydration and exercise, and games kids can play to boost their working memory, which is short-term memory. So whatever they learn to be able to apply to their long-term memory, getting enough sleep so that what they learn goes from short-term memory to long-term memory. Just, simple things, simple ways of communication that make a huge difference, so that if your kid comes in and, you say, "How was your day?" and they say, "Fine," and they walk away, how to talk to them so that they actually talk to you. Just all of those things. It's all been just such a journey. Like, our kids are grown now, and they're very successful adults. But if you'd have told me when they were kids and we were having all of these struggles and butting heads that would be the case, I would have probably laughed. And I hope you're right.
Right. And sometimes kids these days are introverted. My daughter is one of those.
Well, and there are just a few communication things that you can do to actually bring them out and help them to become more comfortable in talking to us. And that's part of social and emotional learning. So they don't need to become extroverts. It's fine that they're introverts, but just so that they can communicate with other people, so that they can connect with other people on a much deeper level, is, and these things are relatively simple to do. It's just we don't know what we don't know.
That's true. And talk about creative brains. Sometimes I used to be, and I knew this, and I know this now. I was all over the place. So talking about writing, I journal, and I don't know if you've done this, but journal, and now I keep a categorized list, so I know what I've got to do and what I've already done.
And I've added a gratitude list to that too.
Oh wow!
Because
Yep.
there are because when we focus on what we're grateful for and we focus on love instead of fear, wow, what a difference it makes.
Mm-hmm.
Just that shift in how we think makes such a big difference. And just reminding ourselves, being intentional, like when we get upset, usually at the core of anger or frustration or whatever, that's usually fear. So if we can go, oh, wait, I can shift that. I don't have to feel like this. And we're conscious about it. It's amazing. The shift, just at first, we're like, how are we supposed to do that? I'm mad. How am I supposed to shift that? I'm already mad, or I'm already frustrated. But eventually, when we're intentional about it, we just get a little better and a little better and a little better until it starts coming easy. It's practice makes better. And believe me, I'm not claiming to be perfect.
Oh, me neither. Nobody's perfect. God's the only perfect, being in
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
in this world. But no, what I do when I get frustrated, I'll step back, walk away from it, and let it kind of marinate, so to speak. And then that voice says, "Well, try this or try that," and then I'll come back to it and figure it out.
Right. Exactly.
And sometimes you have to do
Exactly.
that. So, are there any like tips or advice after you've told since you've told your story? I don't I was going to ask you a lot more questions, but you basically answered the main ones I had. So, and that's good. That's a good thing. So do you have any like advice or takeaways you want to leave with not only your authors, but just any kind of general advice, any advice that you want to leave us with today?
The first one is to give yourself grace. If you haven't been
Yes.
able to get back to your writing for a while, it'll still be there.
Yes.
I learned that so many times. Your writing will still be there. So, if you have to take a pause because things are going on in your life and you don't have time to get your tush in the chair, it will still be there. And if you are inspired to write, if you give yourself specific times during the day and set a timer, I can't even tell you how often I use my phone to use the timer on my phone so that I use time blocks. Because if I don't, especially having attention issues, we also have this other thing called hyperfocus. And if we get into
Yes.
hyperfocus, then we can spend an entire day doing one thing. And maybe we
Oh,
get farther on that one thing, but then a whole bunch of other things have fallen apart.
oh my gosh.
So
Tell me
blocking
about it.
time and using a timer just so that you schedule in writing time just to feed your soul. If that's important to you, then not only give yourself grace, but also give yourself the self-respect and love that you're willing to schedule some time into your life, even if it's a half an hour or an hour. I used to belong to a writers group called Page a Day Writers, where we committed to writing at least one page a day. And we would block out however much time that we felt we had during that day or that we could carve out, because sometimes you just have to carve out the time. I used to just get up really early and write for a half an hour or an hour a day. And then if I had more time during the day, then I would block out more time. But, when our kids were growing up and I was a full-time teacher and all of that, I would have to get up really early in the morning to run. So I got my exercise, and then I would have to, carve out. And my kids knew, oh, mom's writing, this is her hour. And they would leave
Mhm.
me alone for my hour, because that was part of the routine. And they were okay with that. They had other things to do during that hour. And then they could ask me about their homework or, do whatever, just keep their questions or whatever their needs were until after the dinger went off.
Yep.
So kids and work out. If you have children and you want to write, then you can sit down with your kids and say, this is a real need for me. You know, how can we work this out? And if they help us work it out, it's amazing. I mean, they'll keep us on track. Mom, this is the hour you're supposed to be writing. Remember, you can write now. This is your time.
You
You
know,
know,
and
I mean,
I've gotten to share that with a friend of mine because she has a 5-year, well, almost 6, but she has a kid. She's homeschooling and that kind of thing. So she's like, "Well, how am I going to have time to write? I have Molly and I have this and I have." I'm like, and I'm talking to Allie, yeah, Allison Hendricks. Yes, Allie, I'm giving you a shout out here. But and I'm like, well, if you tell Molly you're going to write, then at a certain time, then Molly will keep you on track. Because I'm like, you could, because if she's at that age, and my daughter knows that I have times that I write, and she does her own thing.
Mhm.
She's 13 when she's here with me. Long story. She's almost 14. She kind of can do things on her own while I'm writing.
Mhm.
So, but I mean, I like that. Tell the kids, hey, I'm gonna write at this time, and
Well,
I
no,
love
no, no,
that.
no. I didn't say to tell your kids you're going to write at this time, because then you don't get buy-in. I said, sit down with your kids and say, okay, I know that you have a lot of things going on with you and you want my attention, and I really feel that, and I want to be there for you. And at the same time, writing is really, really important to me. So I'm wondering if we can just, talk about how to work this out. Like, what time do you think would be good for me to take an hour, or whatever amount of time you agree on? What time do you think would be a good time? And brainstorm with them. They can talk about the time, maybe setting a timer, come up with ideas and have them help you come up with it. Then they will help you make sure it happens.
I like
Whereas
that.
if you just say, oh, I'm going to write at this time and this is the way it is, then you don't get buy-in, because they're not part of creating the solution. If we
Right.
make our kids, and that's for any issue in your family, not just writing time, but anything. When kids get to become part of the solution and they get to help create it, and you know what, sometimes they just flat out come up with better ideas than we do.
I love that. Yes, I'm glad you clarified
They
that.
come up with stuff that we don't even think of, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified.
so give yourself grace and give yourself the gift of a specific time during the day when you write. And sometimes during that space of time when you write, you'll just be off and running and do great. And other times you'll putter around for that hour and nothing will really come out, and that's okay too. Whatever it is, because all of these things are going to be stewing in your head. And the other thing is, even when you have a manuscript and you're ready to go, don't give up.
Mm-mm.
Just keep going. But if it's a God thing, then even if you give up like I did, it comes back anyway.
It was meant to be. And
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
right, exactly.
I've heard that.
And the other thing is if you're going to self-publish, please hire a professional editor. It costs more to do that, but you'll have so much more success with your book, and they will see things that you won't. It's not the same to just have a friend look at your book. I
Right.
mean, I've been editing for people for a long time, and that's why I call myself an editor and a coach, because I
Wow.
was a teacher for years, and I don't know how to edit without teaching. So I coach writers as I edit for them, and I have several authors who are best-selling authors now. But the point is that you need somebody to look at your writing who knows what they're looking at. You understand what I'm saying? Who
Mm-hmm.
knows how to flesh out that scene, who knows what's missing, who knows how to fill in the gaps or can find the inconsistencies. Proofreading and editing are completely different things.
It's interesting you should mention that, because I just started doing some editing this year. Because
Cool.
I've gotten, I mean, I've taken a couple of courses, but I've gotten to where I can pick up on, and especially because I read Braille and I use this, Oh, I'm sorry, my camera's not on. My e-reader from the National Library Service. I'll show you that afterwards. But
Which, yeah, I want to see that. That's awesome.
yeah, I will show you that after we get through recording here. But and people have seen it before. I've shown it on videos for those of you listening. And our cameras are off because of technology, you know how that goes. But I will still post this on YouTube. Anyway, but so and when I started doing that, I started picking up on things and I'm like, and I felt like the Lord was leading me to edit. I mean, I don't do a whole lot of it. I do more writing and podcasting than editing right now. But that's one of the tools that I have that I find I don't do the grueling copy editing piece, but I do, and I've started developmental editing, but my line editing is my thing. That's my
Oh,
jam right there. So yeah. Um, so oh, so that I mean, like I said, that's just interesting that you mentioned being an editor. So what inspired you to become an editor and a coach?
well, I had, I, of course, I, so I had been teaching writing to kids for years, and writing myself and passionate about writing and teaching kids grammar and how to make things work, teaching them story structure and what that looked like, teaching them about character arcs um, and the protagonist as well as antagonist, fleshing out both characters instead of making either one of them flat, and what all of those things look like in fiction. And then in nonfiction, how to flesh out and tell stories throughout the nonfiction, because we're wired for story,
Yep.
right? And when we like if we write a memoir, how to create our memoir as a story that's a riveting story that people can relate to is a whole different thing than just saying this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had already had so much fun doing that with kids. And then I started doing that with adults because at one point I came home with my kids because my husband and I thought, he said, Trish, you spend so much time with other people's kids, and now our kids are going into middle school and high school, and we only have one chance at this. And they had been struggling with, social and emotional stuff. So, with their attention issues and whatever. So I came home with them. And when I came home, I started writing articles for San Diego Family Magazine and coaching other authors. So, because it was kind of an extension of what I had been doing in the classroom with kids, I just started doing it with adults. And it was so fun because adults could, they can do so much more, so much faster sometimes. Although sometimes kids, it's easier for them to let go of certain things than it is for adults.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a balance there, but it was just so much fun to help people realize their excitement and ambition and their dream of becoming published, whether it was self-published with a really tight, excellent manuscript that they could turn into a book on their own, or whether it was to get them published and help them find an agent or an independent publishing company to publish their work. So it just was exciting for me. It was just a fun thing to do. And since I was already into the whole writing thing, and I was already writing fiction while I was teaching. So, and part of it, I would bring in scenes to read to the class, or I would write little stories and I would read them to my classes because they loved it, because then they had an example of what writing was like. And then they would like to share theirs because they had the modeling of someone else sharing their work. So it just kind of was something that followed right on with what I was already doing, just with a different group of people.
Wow. So which part of the editing process do you do? Do you do developmental or line edits?
I do it all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I do it all. So one of the things, so here's the thing, I love doing developmental editing and helping people get all of the pieces of their story and their fleshing out of characters and all of that stuff done. But I love to help in the fruition of actually making that happen. So a lot of times people will do a developmental edit with me, then they'll rewrite their story and then they'll bring it back to me and we'll basically finish fleshing it out and, finessing scenes and, working on more subtext and foreshadowing and, all the other advanced things that we do in writing. So, I mean, I just get a kick out of all of it. And then in the very end, I usually print out the manuscript. I let it sit for a while and then I print out the manuscript, and that's when I do the proofreading, because I just don't believe you can get. So that's another thing I want to ask people to do is, if you have somebody proofread your work, make sure they print it out. There's just no way to catch everything on a screen. I've tried for years and years, and every time I print it out, after I've done as much proofreading as I can on screen, I always find other things, because we use different parts of our brain when we read and print versus reading on a screen. Moving pages, marking things, just all that stuff. We're using different areas of our brain, and that connection, because everything's interconnected, that connection makes a difference. So it's really much more thorough if you're going to have somebody proofread something for you, that they print it out.
Right. And I'm going to talk, and I know not all of my audiences, but for those of you who are visually impaired who listen to this, and you're proofreading, that there's a difference in speech. If you can read Braille, you can listen to it with speech, but honestly, I think you might want to proofread it with your Braille display. If you have the e-reader, you have another type of Braille display. If you have that option available, I would do it that way, because you miss a lot when you're just listening to it. You can catch a lot more when you're reading it with your fingers. I wanted to give that, because I know not all of my audience is visually impaired, but I do have a few that subscribe to the podcast or may watch it on YouTube. So I wanted to bring that into focus too. But you mentioned something.
Absolutely. And I am not visually, well, these are trifocals, so I guess I am a bit visually impaired, but I don't read Braille. And you just talking about that is, I mean, and that is just really exciting and fascinating to me. So I'm sure whether people are visually impaired or not, they're just going, oh my gosh, they have all this stuff now for people who are reading, who are visually impaired. That's so awesome.
Yeah, or people who are totally blind. Yeah,
it's just really exciting.
We have more options available to us now. So you mentioned something about a writers group. Well, I am in a writers organization. It's the 540 writers community. You can find them on that group on Facebook, but you can go to 540, I think it's 540writers.com, or just Google 540 writers, because we do write-ins on Zoom. And if you sign up for the newsletter, Becky will tell you, and I'm not going to pronounce her name because I will butcher it. Anyway, she'll in the newsletter, she'll give you the write-in schedule and all that kind of stuff. So I like doing those write-ins on Zoom, because you're not just writing by yourself. We do set a timer, but you're not just writing by yourself. You're writing with other people. And even though it's virtual, you can feed off of that energy.
Hey, you know what? I do Psych K virtually, so we have energy, and we have energy, like spiritual energy, and just like our cell phones that we can connect across the world, call somebody and we're like, we don't really know how this works, but it goes through the air and it works, right? I mean, I've done sessions of Psych K, which is reprogramming your subconscious mind, with people from one person I've done it with was in Lebanon, another one was in Norway. So I mean, and all across the country, another one's in Canada, another one in Mexico. So really take advantage of online writing groups, because that energy, I've even done yoga with people, whole and meditation groups and stuff online, because there really is that connection online as well as in person. So right. I love to do in-person events. I'm not saying we shouldn't do in-person events, but I am saying that if you are in a position where where it's more difficult for you to do an in-person event, really don't discount the whole idea of doing a write-in with a bunch of other writers, because there is shared energy there for sure.
I used to watch I used to watch streams on Twitch and YouTube where we would do write-ins. I mean, I follow some people, but I haven't done those in a while, but I like the Zoom write-ins. And speaking of which, I'm going to be attending the West Virginia uh, ACFW, American Christian Fiction Writers Royal Writers Conference, November 11th and 12th,
Nice.
and that's virtual. So yeah, it's like there's just that energy, that connection, and community is what it's all about. So,
Absolutely.
and we could talk for hours about this, but where can
I
people
know,
find you
right?
online?
Well, you can find me online for parenting at thebrainstages.com. And I have a free, remember we were talking about work it out with your kids. I have a
Mhm.
free problem solving one video lesson on how to problem solve with your kids. It comes with a PDF that has the list of steps, because it's something that will change your life. And you don't have to just do it with kids. You can do it with anyone you live with, your friends, your partner, whoever. because
Okay.
it is life changing when we want something in our lives that or there's something we're uncomfortable with and we're not sure what to do about it and how to fix it. Enlist the other person that you're dealing with to help you work it through. And just doing this, and once you do it for a couple times, you don't need the steps or anything anymore because it's fairly intuitive. So once you've done it a few times, and the person that you're working with or you're living with or whatever gets used to being part of the solution with you, it creates such a feeling of unity. I mean, it's just such a recreation, because we did this with our kids, and my husband and I did this a lot, and we still do now. We've been married 37 years.
Wow.
So, but there were times, especially when the kids were growing up and we were having issues, we're like, oh, are we going to make it? So this problem solving thing it's very simple and it's huge. So they can go to thebrainstages.com and click the red flag in the or the red pane in the header and get that for free. Also, I have another website called write2win.com, and it has hyphens in between right to win. So they can go there and get more information on various things too. But I will say, it's hard to get in for an edit with me because I always have a waiting list. I have a waiting list through March right now.
Oh well, you got a waiting list about a mile long.
Yeah, pretty much. So, but I wanted to let people know that because there are people listening, and I don't want them to think I was advertising my services or whatever. I was just saying, get an editor, have somebody help you create the best thing it can be. Give yourself grace. However your writing works, it works. And to know that if you take a break from your writing for a little bit, that's okay. It's still going to be there.
Yep. So do you, and I got this idea from another podcast I used to listen to. Do you have a call to action? It could be a resource, it could be a challenge that you want people to walk away with?
Yes, I want the challenge that they walk away with, for them to, if writing is important to you, for you to come up with a specific time during the day that you want to write, or every morning come up with a time that's convenient if your schedule changes or whatever, or talk to your kids if you have children, and sometimes having children or your job or whatever, in some way, the call to action is to make sure that you have a specific time that you're going to write, and that you set your timer on your phone, whether it's 15 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, whatever your life looks like. Set up a time to write so that you actually get to writing. And it doesn't matter, because a lot of times we say, well, I don't feel like writing, and the muse has to hit me or whatever. A lot of times, if you just get your butt in the chair and you're just writing and doing some free writing, and sometimes the first thing you write can be, gosh, I'm not really sure what to write today. And then you do a little bit of free writing, and then it'll just start coming to you. And then
Right.
you just delete the first part and
Yeah.
keep the next part.
Uh-huh. Do you use and I know I'm wrapping up here, but do you have any, like, do you use music or have any totems that help you with your writing?
I do not use music. I often pray to get my head in the space
Mm-hmm.
where I want to be, kind of do a prayer meditation thing before I get into the space for writing. But I don't use music because I used to be in the music business. I had my own band for a while. I sing. I still sing in the band at church. Just because I love music, but I can't play music when I write because I hear every instrument, every line. So so I can't listen to music when I write because it's too distracting. My brain just keeps going back and forth from the writing to the music.
Mm.
I have a hard time separating it. I know. Most writers I know listen to music. I wish I could say I were one of those. I am not.
Some days I'm like that, some days not. Some I've found, there's a instrumental list I listened to. Well, I got wind of during the Kingdom Writers Conference,
Oh,
and
nice.
her name is Tammy Sorensen, and I love her instrumental stuff. Sometimes I use that when I'm writing, but then there are days when I just can't focus. I focus more on the music than I do the writing. I totally
Yeah.
get that. So, any last minute things you want to add before we close?
Just if you're a writer, have fun writing. It's supposed, I mean, just enjoy it on whatever level you can enjoy it. If you get frustrated with it, walk away for a while and then come back
Hmm.
because writing is a form of art. It's a form of meditation. It's just kind of a higher level thinking activity in every way. So if you're not enjoying it for a while or you feel like it's just not clicking, get up and walk away and then come back when you feel a little better. Just go take a little break and then come back.
Right. So we challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired. Write something inspiring and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for joining us on Inspirational Journeys. And remember, your story matters.
Mhm.
Have a blessed day, everyone.